The AllStar app, the #1 app in the business. UFC, Bellator, One Championship, PFL, and more. Get the app right now. Link in description. All right, Rob. Let's get right into it, man. I want to ask you, starting with about this journal that you have, and I don't know if you want to expose like what goes into this journal, but I want to know. It's interesting to me.
Um, I have a couple. I have like a daily planner, but that's kind of where I write like my training for the day, um, and like little motivational things. I usually write a quote. I'm actually writing a quote from Conor McGregor at the moment. That says, "Hard things become easy when you commit yourself fully." I quite like that. I'll be writing that pretty much all year, each day, and then just like an affirmation about, as I said in the post-fight interview in my last one, I was writing probably over 2 years ago now that I'll be a world champion in 2022. So, I kind of write down that I'm the best fighter in the world, blah blah blah. Now I kind of focus on my opponent. On November 25th, I'm going to beat Omari Akhmedov at Madison Square Garden to become the PFL 2022 light heavyweight world champion.
How important is it for a fighter to remind themselves of that? You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of fighters they also have bad days at the office. You know what I mean? In training, and you could be down on yourself.
Yeah, definitely. It was actually my sister who told me years and years and years ago. It's probably about 10 years ago. Like, if I ever like, do I do any goal setting or anything like that? And I hadn't done any, and I kind of set some goals, short term, medium term, kind of longer term goals. I think I set like up to 5 years ahead, and then I kind of looked back on them like 5 years later, and I was like, oh, it's crazy. I've actually ticked off a lot of those, like pretty much all of those goals. But then obviously I wrote those and kind of put them away. You're not necessarily reading them every day. So I quite like writing. Sometimes I write monthly goals for each month, even if it's the same goal. And I'll put like yearly goals and like the same goal every time, but just kind of writing it down and writing down an affirmation or some quotes to motivate you. I find obviously you have bad days, and I still have shitty days at the gym or days I can't be bothered doing it. But I find overall, if I am using that daily planner or my journal every day, I'm more consistent and I've got a little bit more push in me than if I say forget for like 2 weeks. I kind of notice, I haven't been doing that for 2 weeks. Also, I haven't been, training as well for the last couple of weeks. So for me, it definitely kind of keeps me accountable and definitely helps me keep focused on my kind of long-term goals and what I'm doing it for, even if you wake up feeling like shit.
Yeah, man. I think even though you love what you do, you still have those days, right, where you're like, "Fuck, like, man, it's not that day. I don't think I want to do that today."
Oh, definitely, man. Especially when you're in fight camp and you're training hard, and you're getting the shit bin out of you. You're sore. You didn't get enough sleep or whatever, and you wake up. You're like, oh, I'd love to just lay in bed and do nothing all day, but got to get to the gym.
Exactly, especially with the schedule that you're keeping with this PFL tournament, right? Like,
Yeah,
damn, it's been nothing short of a phenomenal, especially the performance you've had. You put so much work in to camps and training, but you only go in there for like a minute or two and then you're out of there. It's like, did I get to show everything? Like, that's what's good about getting into this finals, right? You haven't shown everything yet.
yeah, that's definitely good. That's what one of the things my coach is saying. It's been good because they haven't actually been able to see that much of me, and being out here in Denver since the first fight, since April after the first fight, I've been training at Factory X, and obviously working on some new stuff, have some new coaches, and I feel like I'm improving my game. So I haven't been able to show all of that, which is a good thing going into the final. But each fight I've been trying to set myself a goal of going in there to, you know, compete at my best, show my best, like have my best performance yet. And I think I've been doing that each time, and I want to kind of keep doing that as I go through it.
You mentioned, you log in like your training and everything. What has been the biggest improvement you think just by looking back at your journals?
What do you mean by biggest
In
improvement?
like your training, I mean, is there like personal records that you have, even for like strength and conditioning, or just like maybe time, something that's timed, or like even like exchanges with people?
Obviously, it's hard to like see your improvements in like sparring or in training because you're not necessarily getting scored or judged on it. But strength and conditioning is definitely a big one. And I think that's, I've done a lot of that my whole career. And I think I quite like that because you can see when you're improving. You can see your weight's getting heavier or your time's getting quicker or whatever it is. But one test we do, it's probably my least favorite test to do, is a 5-minute flat out assault bike test. So it's not fun. You got to kind of semi-pace yourself, but it's flat out for 5 minutes. And seeing that number go up, I want to get that. My goal is to get 2.5 miles in 5 minutes. And I think the last time I got it, I got 2.4. So I'm very close to getting that.
All right. Sounds good. Do you have I don't want to call them a arch nemesis, but like a competitive person, like in strength and conditioning or even in like the gym or whatever?
Yeah, Cody Brundage, especially at strength and conditioning, he's always good at talking shit, and we're usually the two bigger guys in our team that go out at that time. So we're normally competing against each other, which is awesome because I like competing, and obviously when you've got someone to compete against, you're pushing yourself a little bit harder in those sessions than maybe you would if you didn't have him there.
Any funny stories or anything you want to expose about Cody that maybe you got an upper hand on?
Nothing too much that comes to mind. It's normally just a lot of shit talking and a lot of him talking about America being good, and I'm talking about Australia being good. So it's just that. It's pretty much nonsense. But
yeah. You have to deal with that, right? That's one thing that you just got to get used to, huh?
Yeah, I've had a lot of Australian questions or Australian accents and that sort of thing since I've been here.
Is it easier to do the American accent? Because it seems like with actors, like people from Australia or the UK, they could do American accent, and I don't even have an idea that they're from Australia until like they're doing an interview. But for Americans, they can't do the accents.
I think maybe like even for us coming over here, I don't even notice the accent because we've got so much TV and movies that we kind of watch our life. So you're kind of always seeing it. So maybe that's why it's easier, and they've like heard it so much compared to like you don't see that many Australian movies or that sort of stuff. So I guess maybe that's why it's easier.
Yeah, I want to know why that happens, but yeah, let's get into the you got a lot of time still left until the finals, right? November 25th.
Yeah, got about 7
Like right now,
7 or 6.5.
November,
Yeah.
okay, 7 or 6.5 weeks. Do you make this camp a little shorter than previous camps because you've been through so many training camps in such a short period of time?
No, it's probably maybe even a tiny bit longer since the other ones have been 8 weeks or 7 weeks after the first one. Obviously, the first one, when I signed with the PFL, I was super excited, and I had a very long, pretty much as soon as I signed with them, I was focused and I was training hard towards that. So the whole start of the year, I was training towards that fight. And then the next year, I only had 8 and 7 weeks apart. Both times I had a good week off after the fight just to mentally and physically relax and go explore and just kind of not think about it, then get back into training. This time we had 16 weeks between the fights, so we had ages. So I had a good 2 weeks off completely where I just relaxed, and then I started getting back into training a little, training, but not as hard as like fight camp. And then probably since like 10 weeks out, I've been kind of knuckling down, and then usually 8 weeks I really kind of switch mentally and try and focus even more. Yeah.
What is that switch like for you?
Just little things like trying to eat a little bit better, doing some fight study, making sure I'm doing little things in the morning. Like I like having a morning routine where, I see some sunlight, I move my body, I meditate, drink some water, go to bed a little bit earlier, do some stretching and that sort of stuff at home. Just the little things that I might do a little bit of when I'm not fully in fight camp, but when, I just kind of do more regularly and try and make it more of a habit when I am in fight camp for sure.
Yeah, it seems like for fighters, it's getting into that routine, the cycle, right? And not breaking it and getting into motion, right? And it builds up and builds up and builds up, and then you peak. Like you've been peaking so well the last few fights, man. Like, what does that feel like for you? Like when you peak at the perfect moment?
I mean, that's a big part of it, and obviously you don't want to be overtrained or undertrained, but yeah, it's kind of the best feeling because leading up, like maybe especially if you have had a decent 8-week camp, when you get to about 3 weeks before the fight, you're just like, I can't be bothered training anymore. You're over it. You can't be bothered. You kind of I generally start 2 weeks before the fight, kind of tapering down a little bit, bringing down the volume, and then you start feeling good again. And by fight day, you're ready to go and you're fully recovered, and you're at your peak. So it's good. It's a good feeling.
Yeah, you and your teammates have good banter, and you do have some of the highest level guys with you, and they also have fights coming up. I just spoke to Josh Frem, and he has a huge fight for himself, and you guys been preparing together. Before you got into camp, was there anything that you needed to like work on yourself personally, in the training room?
I was just trying to round out my game. I was making sure, I guess, mainly like getting my body right. I had a few, I know my fights have been short, but during fight camps and stuff, you get little niggles and injuries, and kind of just making sure my body was ready to go. Because I can't remember who it was. I was listening to someone from last year talk about it and focus on a lot on like making sure they're ready, like recovering. Like as we were talking about, you don't want to be overtrained back to back to back to back fights. So making sure my body's healthy is number one, and then kind of just having fun with it, getting back into it, game planning now for my opponent.
Yeah, your opponent, man, Akhmedov, a lot of tape on him, some decent performances. Was there any like one particular performance that stood out to you about him?
I think after his first fight in the PFL, when he got that big knockout, I think everyone thought he was pretty scary. And it was pretty brutal knockout. That was an awesome performance by him. But yeah, I don't think he's generally not known as a huge knockout guy. He's got good wrestling. As you said, heaps of tape on him. He's been around for ages, so he's a high level guy, and it's I'm definitely excited to fight someone at that kind of level and tick that name off my list. So yeah.
It's always about ticking names off the list, right? In your journal, right?
Yeah, well, that's what you want. I want the Santos signing with the PFL. I want those big names. I want to be considered one of the best fighters in the world. So you can't do that by fighting people no one knows. So you got to start fighting those names that have been around or had heaps of fights. Whatever it is, been in the UFC, high level guys. So that's what I want. So
I wanted to go back. You talked about learning lessons in the last post fight interview that you had, and what were the biggest learning lessons do you think you had throughout your career that has benefited you throughout this season?
I think just being consistent and not kind of trying to do everything all at once, whether that's in your fighting or outside of fighting, and then you're like, I got to fight now. Now I got to be, training really hard. Just trying to be more consistent every day. Like pretty much, for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been training very consistently, and sure you have breaks, but I've been trying to hold myself accountable. And one thing is enjoying it. I have got to the point, and when I was with the UFC, I was at the point where I wasn't even enjoying my training anymore. I was kind of doing it because I had to do it. I had fights coming up, but I try to remember why I chose to do this sport, and it's because as soon as I started, I loved it, and I love competing, and I love training, and I want to make sure I can bring that with me, for my career. I've talked to my friends, talked to friends who have other jobs and hate their jobs, and kind of said, like, if you hate your job, you should quit, do something else. And I've talked my friends into kind of quitting jobs before, and they have. So like same for me. Like why am I doing this if I'm doing it so much that I'm not liking it? I'm doing it wrong. Like I need to change something. So that's one big key for me, is just like enjoying what I'm doing, and makes my performances a lot better for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the proof is in the pudding, like I like to say sometimes. The last time we spoke, you told me I'm getting this dude out early, Delon Monte, and you did. You got him out early.
Yeah.
What do you see in this fight? The world championship is on the line now.
Obviously, I've got a lot of first round finishes, so it could be done early. But Omari, he's a tough guy. He's very experienced, and I think it'll go. Honestly, I think I'll probably finish him in the second or third round. Yeah, I think it'll be a good fight, and it's nice to go a little distance, especially for all my friends and stuff and family coming over from Australia, so they can see a little bit of a show. But yeah, I think I'll be able to put him away second or third round.
So there's going to be a little section in NYC for Australia then.
Yeah, there's going to be a few people there. It's going to be good.
Yeah, the Australian crowd, man, I experienced them for the first time in Singapore because there was a lot of Australians fighting on the UFC card in Singapore, and I was like, yo, this makes it completely different because usually Asian crowds are pretty quiet.
Yeah, yeah. Those guys are Australians in general are rowdy, and my friends that are coming across are pretty rowdy. They've had some big chants going before and been very noisy, so it's going to be good having them there.
Yeah, I love it, man. November 25th, PFL 2022 Championships. If you want to know more about the event, go into the descriptions and download the AllStar app. And if you want to know more about Rob, go download it. Rob, thank you so much, man. It's great to be talking with you before this fight, and all the best, man, in this fight, and take that title back to Australia.
I will do. Thank you, buddy.